All right, let's get right into it. We are at Chapter 16, Part 4. A tour group was standing before tapping cues, blinding the gaudy little fellow with the flashes from their cameras. Archer, Oliver, and Adelaide plowed their way through. "Tigers," said Archer. "No," said a foolish man. "It's pronounced Tappenkoos." The man quickly dropped his camera and ran with everyone else when he realized what was happening. The trio ducked into an ancient ruin and shot out the other side. They dashed from the Egyptian wing and up a spiraling stair. At the top, Archer planted his feet, whipping Adelaide and Oliver to the right and pouring them into the wing of ocean life. Mr. Glubb was sitting at his desk, writing an article for the newspaper. Without notice, two journalists burst in. "Tigers," said one. "Museum," said the other. Mr. Glubb smiled and leaned back in his chair. "Slow down," he said. "Now what's this all about?" When they finally got the story out, Mr. Glubb jumped to his feet, grabbed his coat, and ran from the office with a reporter on either side. "How many wings does this place have?" said Oliver, as they dashed beneath a massive octopus. The music was still blaring from the intercoms, but then they heard an announcement, too. "Please make your way to the nearest exit. We ask everyone to calmly make their way to the nearest exit. Please see a guard for help if needed." Everyone was already moving to the exits, but there was nothing calm about it. Everywhere was panic. Some people were screaming, others were shouting, but everyone was running. Parents grabbed children, others gave up and crouched in corners. "Which way is the exit?" Oliver yelled, bouncing off a giant squid. "Behind us," said Archer. He broke his own rule and glanced over his shoulder. The tigers were slipping all over the place, but they were still very much after them. He didn't understand. Why were they the only ones being chased? "We can't go back," he said as they spilled into a hall and down a flight of stairs. Oliver lost a shoe. It clomped a tiger on the head. "That way," said Archer. They flew into the butterfly pavilion. They were growing tired as they dashed past row after row of neatly aligned butterfly boxes. Alarms were flashing and gates were slamming all around. "They're going to lock us in," said Adelaide. "With the tigers," said Oliver. "Not yet," said Archer. Mr. Belmont was too busy running his espresso machine to notice the hordes of people fleeing Rosewood Park. The flowery woman wasn't. She spun around on her bar stool and almost began clapping. "Oh, look," she cried, "it's a parade. I do so very much love a parade." "Oh, but it's a strange parade." "Yes, a very strange one indeed." Mr. Belmont dashed outside. This was no parade. He looked up at the museum towers. Someone yelled, "Tiger!" Mr. Belmont took off. The flowery woman slipped behind the bar to make herself a triple. They were running much slower when they burst back into the great hall. It had emptied and security gates blocked the exits. "We're trapped," said Adelaide. "With the tigers," said Oliver. "To the kiosk," said Archer. A round kiosk stood at the center of the hall, and they ran in a tight circle around it. The tigers followed but slid all over the place. There was nowhere else to go. A row of telephone booths stood to their right. Archer planted his feet and whipped the others toward the booths. "Get inside and shut the doors," he yelled. They held tightly to one another to the last possible second. Then all three let go. They leaped into the booths and slammed the doors. The tigers crashed against the booths. Phones flew off the hooks. Oliver had his eyes shut. Adelaide was on the seat with her wooden leg pressed tightly against her door, trying to keep it shut. Archer dodged a swinging phone, but struck his head hard against the wall. Everything went black. "Archer," said Adelaide. "Archer," said Oliver. "Is he okay?" "I don't know." Archer opened his eyes. He was sitting crumbled in a cold sweat, but he didn't know where he was. Oliver and Adelaide were studying him. "Did we make it to the ship?" he asked. "No," said Adelaide. "Not even close," said Oliver. "Out of the way," ordered a security guard, pushing Adelaide and Oliver to the side. He noticed Oliver's arm and pointed to a nurse. "Have her take a look at that." Adelaide followed Oliver to the nurse. Archer was still trying to make sense of everything as the guard reached out his hand. Two guards escorted Archer, Oliver, and Adelaide through a door and down a back hallway. They had been summoned to the director's office. Archer was still fuzzy, but nearly back to his senses. "What happened after we jumped into the booths?" he asked. "I thought it was over," said Oliver, "until zoo personnel burst in with tranquilizers. We stayed inside the booth, said Adelaide, but they saw us. I thought they were going to tranquilize us when they did, Oliver said. Adelaide nodded. We're in a great deal of trouble. At the top of a staircase, one of their guards knocked on a door and they entered a large, dusty office with a giant window that overlooked the great hall. A man, who could only be a director of the museum, was standing next to his desk, speaking with two more guards. He paused when they entered. Archer didn't like the way he stared at them. It made him feel like a criminal. The director turned back to the guards. Just bring it to me, he said, and he sent them out while motioning the trio to come forward. Take a seat, he instructed, pointing to a bench beside his desk. Archer, Oliver, and Adelaide did so, and the director gave them a chance to speak. It just sort of happened, said Oliver. It wasn't our fault, said Archer, but we did great. Adelaide chose not to say anything. No one was eaten, agreed the director, sitting back down, but there's a lot of middle ground between not getting eaten and something being great. That wasn't what Archer meant, but before he could clarify, a guard re-entered the office and handed the director a report. The director secured his glasses and mumbled quietly as he read. Which of you is Oliver Glubb? He asked. Oliver slowly raised his hand. And what exactly were you thinking bringing a gazelle mask into a room filled with tigers? Oliver turned to Archer and Adelaide for support. He was never good when adults questioned him. The mask didn't matter, Adelaide said. What matters is how the tigers were able to escape. Weren't they chained down? The director pinched his lips and grunted. I'm looking into it, he replied. We've already canceled the partnership. He returned to the report and a few lines later pointed a finger at Archer and Adelaide. And I assumed then that you two were the ones on the museum rooftop. You were on the roof, said Oliver. We didn't know where we were going, said Archer. Not until we got there, said Adelaide. You went through a museum personnel-only door, said the director. I expect you knew that much. Archer and Adelaide were silent. They did know that much. And the life raft, shouted the director. How did you get that thing inside the museum? Oliver was surprised about that, too. It wasn't heavy, he said, but I also didn't know it was a raft until I pulled the string. To be honest, I wasn't sure what it was. But why did you have it in the museum, the director demanded. No one needs a life raft in a museum. We did, said Adelaide. We would be dead without it, said Archer. The director grunted again. Do you have any idea the amount of damage you've inflicted on my museum? He asked. A 2,000-year-old jeweled egg was cracked. There is glass all over the place. The tigers smashed more things than could be listed on this report, and hundreds were nearly killed. We were just trying to get out of the way, said Adelaide. It wasn't our fault the tigers broke free. And they were only chasing us, said Archer. I don't know why. The director pointed at Oliver's now bandaged arm. Blood and gazelles, he said. It's a dangerous combination. And by the way, which one of you is a Helmsley? I am, said Archer. I'm Archer Helmsley. The director stared at him over the top of his glasses. Of course you are, he said, shaking his head. Don't remember me, do you? Archer had never met this man before and said just that. I've been to Helmsley House, he replied. I was there the night you placed the porcupine on that man's chair. Archer went red. He'd forgotten about the glob of seal. Adelaide and Oliver looked at each other, trying not to smile. Archer noticed his jade elephant house sitting on the desk. I think that's mine, he said, pointing to it. What do you mean it's yours? It was from my grandparents, Archer explained. I must have dropped it. The director blinked at him and then picked up the phone with a sigh. There's been a misunderstanding. I know what I said. Just get him back here, please. He tossed the jade elephant house at Archer and placed the report into his breast pocket. The rest of your class has returned to school, he said. Your teacher, Mrs. Merkley, said Adelaide. Yes, well, the poor woman was discovered on the floor next to a polar bear. We assume she ran into it during the chaos. Another polar bear, mumbled Oliver. Archer and Adelaide went silent. We think it fell on her, nearly killed her. He looked at his watch and opened the door. Now follow me, your parents are waiting for you. He flashed Archer an unpleasant smile. And I'm glad it's not me they're waiting for. They followed the director back to the great hall and down the museum steps. People were standing everywhere. No one was happy. They followed him to the edge of Rosewood Park and to the street where Mrs. Merkley was being loaded into the back of an ambulance. Is she all right? Asked Archer. There's always hope, said the director, but no one can understand a word she's saying. The director opened a taxicab door and told them to get in. "We live close," said Archer. "We can walk." "That's what your mother was afraid of," the director said, ushering them into the back seat. "Get in, all of you. Mind your fingers." He slammed the door and instructed the driver to take them to 375 Willow Street and to make sure they were all inside the house before leaving. The taxi drove off. Chapter 17 is next. See you tomorrow.